Hello, thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today I have a list of movies that I think you will be genuinely shocked to hear are based on books. And now I have read my fair share of listicles that have titles very similar to this, but they always seem to mention the same movies, like Forrest Gump, Jaws, Shawshank Redemption, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Apocalypse Now. And so it's always just these huge iconic movies that have overshadowed the books they were based on tend to be the theme. And they're also older movies a lot of the time too. And so I have compiled a list of movies that I feel like aren't often mentioned in these kind of articles. And my hope is that at least one of these movies you will be genuinely surprised by. And we're just gonna get right into it, beginning with Mean Girls. So I did recently do a book versus movie video for this one. So if you've been subscribed to my channel, some of these won't surprise you because you've already seen that I have a video on them, right? But so many times I do a book versus movie video, people will say like, wow, like I had no idea this was based on a book. And I got that with Mean Girls. You know, it's not a direct adaptation per se, because Tina Fey took this self-help book and she took a lot of the situations and the character types and a lot of examples from the book. Tina Fey took that and turned it into a narrative comedy. And she did a fantastic job. And so even though it's not a direct adaptation though, when I read the book, it was so fun to see just how many things in the book are reflected in the movie. And I will go ahead and link to my book versus movie if you want to hear more about that. And next up we have Fletch. So yeah, the laid-back reporter who solves mysteries, made famous by Chevy Chase, is based on a series of books. The first Fletch movie is a direct adaptation. Fletch Lives is not adapted from a specific book, but then the later adaptation, Confess Fletch, that one again is a direct adaptation. And I did cover Confess Fletch, but I have not covered the first Fletch movie. I've seen the Chevy Chase Fletch movies, but I haven't read the books. And to be honest, I didn't love Confess Fletch, the book, so I'm not super interested in reading anymore, but who knows? Maybe one day I'll do a Fletch book versus movie. We'll see. And speaking of iconic characters, Drive is based on a book by James Salas. So this is a noir style story about a stunt driver turned getaway driver. And the book is fantastic. The movie made quite a few changes, but both of them are just so good. I highly recommend the book if you're a fan of the movie. I highly recommend the movie if you're a fan of the book. It was hard to follow, like the way it's written, we jump around so much, and I did have to read it twice in order to fully understand the plot. But it was well worth it, and I loved it, and I highly recommend it. And again, the movie, it's just so iconic and so fantastic. And then we have Bullet Train. So this fast-paced action comedy starring Brad Pitt is based on the Japanese novel by Kotaro Isaka. And this is one I think is surprising is based on a book because the movie, you know, it has this Guy Ritchie feel to it, and you just don't think of that being in a book, I guess. But Bullet Train, the book, it does have such a cinematic feel to it, so it makes sense it was adapted because it feels like it should be a movie, you know? And I don't mean that as an insult by any means because I love Kotaro Isaka. He is a fantastic writer. I highly, highly recommend you read Bullet Train and Three Assassins. He also has a third book in this series called The Mantis, which I recently read. So yeah, I absolutely loved Bullet Train. It was so fun, so action-packed, so entertaining. I loved the characters. They were all so distinct. And Kotaro Isaka writes fantastic endings. So yeah, highly recommend the book. The movie, I did have a lot of fun with it, but the book was definitely better. And then we have The Fly. So, you know, we have the 80s movie, and most people know that the 80s movie is like the remake of the Vincent Price movie from the 50s, but not many people know that the Vincent Price movie is based on a short story. And the Vincent Price movie is very similar to the short story, whereas the Cronenberg movie definitely, you know, puts its own spin on it. But yeah, it all started with a short story which was originally printed in Playboy. And then The Phantom of the Opera. So this is a musical and a silent film, both of which are very famous, but it all started with a book. And the book, the most shocking thing to find out when you read the book is that the Phantom's name is Eric, and he's referred to as Eric. And so the Phantom, you know, especially the musical, there's just so much mystery with him, right? And the fact that he has such a normal name, it just was kind of surprising. But yeah, the book and the silent film and the musical all have their differences. The book is my least favorite of the three, to be honest. I love the silent film. Lon Chaney is incredible. But then I also love what the musical does with the story too. So I do love both movies. But yeah, it all started from a book. And I Know What You Did Last Summer is based on a book by Lois Duncan. And when I was a teenager, I was obsessed with Lois Duncan books because she writes YA thrillers and I absolutely loved them. And this one, the movie takes a lot of liberties with the story. The original book is not a slasher book. Like I said, it's like a YA mystery. And so the fact that they turned it into this 90s slasher, it's very different. But the premise is fairly similar. But yeah, the overall story definitely goes in different directions. And so it was interesting reading the book and then watching the movie, which the movie is just peak 90s. And I have such fond memories watching this. But then I have fond memories reading Lois Duncan too, because like I said, I was obsessed with her books. So I have fond memories with both book and movie, but yeah, this is an interesting one because so many people know of this movie and all the sequels that have been made, but I feel like not many people have heard of the book. Although I could be wrong, I don't know, Lois Duncan, she was a popular author. Maybe more people know this one than I'm realizing. Anyway, on to the next one, Limitless, which is based on a book called The Dark Fields. And yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed the book as well. The endings are different. I forget now which one I preferred because I did cover this one in 2021, but that was a while ago now. So I think I liked the book ending better, but I did really like the movie as well, which of course stars Bradley Cooper. And then we have a Paul Thomas Anderson classic, There Will Be Blood. This movie is so fantastic. I love it so much. And it is based on the book Oil by Upton Sinclair. Although caveat with this one as well, because Paul Thomas Anderson, he based the movie off of like the first 100 pages of Oil, because the first 100 pages are about a man and his son who build oil derricks and how there's a family as well, and one of the sons in the family like become a preacher, and so those aspects do come from the book, but the movie really takes it and turns it into something else. And the book also partway through, it becomes a lot about socialism and communism, and the dynamic between the father and son is very different. And then the movie goes more into the preacher, who is played by Paul Dano in the movie. But yeah, I love the movie, and I think that's the better version here, although I did enjoy reading Oil for the most part. But yeah, this movie is just incredible. I could gush about it forever because it is just so fantastic. But yeah, very different from the book in a lot of ways, and the overall tone also is very different. So you could argue that this isn't a faithful adaptation by any means, but it is a fantastic movie. And then we have Matchstick Men. I am a huge Nicolas Cage fan, and it's funny, he's been in so many movies, and yet not many of his movies are based on books, which is kind of interesting. You know, DiCaprio is someone where so many of his movies are based on books, and then Nicolas Cage, so many aren't. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting. But anyway, Joe with Nicolas Cage is also a fantastic movie, which is based on a book. But this one, Matchstick Men, is just such a fantastic movie. It is so fun, so entertaining. It is about con artists, which I know I tend to find so interesting, even though when I really think about it, con artists are such horrible people in real life, right? But fictional stories about them, I find so entertaining. If you have not seen this movie, you really should. I highly recommend it. And yeah, so much of what makes the movie great does come from the book. But with the movie, you have the added bonus, again, of just fantastic performances. And next up is one I have not covered, and that is The Ring. So again, a lot of people know that this is a remake of the Japanese movie, but I don't know if people know that the Japanese movie is an adaptation of a Japanese book. So I personally have not covered this one, but Cover to Credits, another book versus movie podcast, they did cover it. So I listened to their episode and it was really interesting. So yeah, if you like the movie Ring, maybe you should check out the book. And then we have Cool Hand Luke, which, talking about iconic performances, Paul Newman as Luke. This movie, he is just so fantastic. And this is one where the movie is better than the book because the book just wasn't as engaging. You're just good on the movie on this one. The movie is just the better version here. And then Mrs. Doubtfire. This is based on the book Madame Doubtfire. Both have the same premise, and obviously the movie was made famous by Robin Williams. But yeah, again, I haven't read the book, and honestly, I haven't seen the movie either. I've seen clips, but I've never seen it all the way through. But I recently discovered it was based on a book, so maybe I should go ahead and watch the movie for the first time and do an episode on it. And now Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock is based on a book, and that's one that will sometimes be on lists. However, I think the more surprising one that's based on a book is Vertigo. It is based on a French book, And this movie, again, it's just so fantastic. A lot of people consider this to be Alfred Hitchcock's best. And so I would be really curious to read the book and do a book versus movie for this. I'm a huge Alfred Hitchcock fan. And that brings me to another section about directors who make like such iconic movies, and yet they're often adaptations, but people don't realize they're adaptations. And Alfred Hitchcock is one of them. He has a number of movies that are adaptations. Psycho, Rear Window, The Birds, Rebecca, Rope is based on a play, Strangers on a Train, Marnie, To Catch a Thief, Dial M for Murder is also based on a play, Notorious. So many movies that he has made that are absolutely fantastic and incredible are adaptations. And then another director who often does adaptations is Martin Scorsese. So Killers of the Flower Moon recently, but also Casino, Goodfellas, Shutter Island, Aviator, The Wolf of Wall Street, Age of Innocence, Silence, Hugo, The Color of Money, The Last Temptation of Christ, and more. I've covered Killers of the Flower Moon, Shutter Island, and Goodfellas. But yeah, he has so many adaptations. And then another one is Stanley Kubrick. So I almost think like all of his movies are adaptations. 2001: A Space Odyssey, Clockwork Orange, The Shining, Eyes Wide Shut, Full Metal Jacket, Doctor Strangelove, Lolita. And of his movies, I have only done The Shining, but I would definitely love to return to him and cover more of his work. And speaking of directors who do hundreds of takes for their movies, David Fincher is another one who constantly does adaptations. The Killer, Gone Girl, Benjamin Button, Fight Club, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network, Zodiac. And I have covered Zodiac and Gone Girl, but I think those are the only two David Fincher movies I've done. And so yeah, I thought it was just interesting to look at different directors who are very iconic, who often do adaptations. But then before we end, I wanted to go through the movies that were mentioned on my Instagram post when I asked people to share movies that they were surprised were based on books. So we have Jaws, Contact, Ocean's 11. That one definitely surprised me. I did not know that. Die Hard, Trainspotting, Full Metal Jacket, The Virgin Suicides, which is a recent one that I covered. And then there's a movie called Coma from 1978, which is based on a book, which I hadn't even heard of the movie Coma. And yeah, again, let me know if any of these surprised you. I hope I was able to come up with at least one unique adaptation that you didn't expect. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want more book versus movie content, I will go ahead and link to a relating video here on the screen. I haven't come up with which one I will link to yet, so I'm not sure. But whatever one I end up choosing will be linked here on the screen. So go ahead and check that video out. And again, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.